Just getting everything nice and set up. We have 11 by 15, a quarter sheet of Stonehenge Aqua, cold press watercolor paper. Just going to saturate this with water like usual, and then we'll set up the palette and come up with a plan for this painting. Okay, so we have the paper covered. We might have to add a little bit in a moment. We'll let everything kind of soak. Let's clean off the center of this palette and think about what we want to do today. I'm thinking that today I want to try something different, something bold. I have done something like this in the past, I believe, however not on a video. I want to, and it's been a while, and as you paint, you know, your painting progresses, changes, your style switches up. But I think with the current style that I'm painting with, I will take a very strong dollop of cerulean blue and use that in the horizon and the sky. So kind of an experiment, you know, see how things play out and see how that strong paint will work with everything else. I don't really have a composition in mind. I think I'll put that in the sky and then bring it down below as in like a reflection with water. We'll have to probably use raw sienna around it. Let me put some burnt sienna down. Payne's gray on the palette already, but I'm thinking things will have to be quite dark. So we'll probably do the kind of sticky trees that we've been doing lately, so we'll play with that on top. And the Payne's gray, we put on down our, I think that was a burnt sienna I put down in the wrong spot. I have to move that. I think I did that last time, but on the other side of the palette with my Payne's gray and my ultramarine. So you just, you know, scrape it up with the card. There you go, burnt umber. That. Anything else that we need to do? All right, so that's the experiment for today. You know, the big old dollop of the cerulean blue. I think I'll have to be a little bit more. I would have to be free with that, but I'll have to be careful with how it mixes with the colors around it. Looking for my ultramarine, which is back here. Because with the raw sienna and the ultramarine, we don't get too much mixing. That, you know, the green doesn't really start to take place, but cerulean, we might see a little bit of interaction. This one's pigment PB15. I think that's a phthalo blue pigment that it's off of. Let's see. That's something for you to look at and research. Okay, one last wetting. Everything nice soaked. Flatten this out. Let's see. I even took a second cup of water in here for I made a rinse with that phthalo blue. Cerulean blue. Put this right here. Bring this down if we want to have a reflection. Let's rinse. Grab that cerulean. Might even have to wipe off the palette. So I won't come back to it, I don't think. I'll just kind of throw it here. Okay. All right. Rinse that off. I'm going to wipe it off the palette. That mixture, that watering mixture I did. I don't really plan on using it for any mixtures. However, okay, so this is alizarin crimson. It may help to keep that on the palette to mix and get some more harmonious mixtures with everything else, but I just want to kind of fit this color, that image, transpose it, so to speak, amongst the style that I've been currently doing, and see how that just how that speaks against everything else. By the way, shout out to my dad, who's been watching my tutorial videos. So how's it going, Dad? He's been whenever I talk to him on the phone, he says he's been watching them and enjoying them, and the concepts have been interesting. So it's really cool to hear, and it's good to have y'all support, so thank you. Let's see. Now I'm going to take that ultramarine. It's a little too strong, but I'll work my way down. But then I'll come back over it with Payne's Gray. Like I said, I have a feeling that everything will need to be darker coming down over this. I'm kind of loosely mimicking what I'm doing up above, down below. I'm not even sure, like landscape composition wise, what I'm going to do down here. I just think once I do solidify land over it, it'll leave a good reflection as if it was water in those spots. And I don't think that, or I think it's a relatively successful way of establishing water reflections, to do it at this stage rather than later on. I'm mixing a little bit of what is it, my burnt umber into this, putting that into the sky. So the sky is getting quite dark in this one. Let's do thin clouds. So as we get closer to the horizon, thinner clouds. I could use some of the lifting techniques that we discovered in other videos. Kind of catching a little bit of light on the bottom of these clouds. Breaking up the monotony of these washes, as if there's those kind of lower clouds that you'll see rushing past whenever you know, it's kind of like overcast at night, something like that. And we could even soften that up some too. Okay, now we can start coming up with a plan for the land itself. I am going to mix my Venetian red, which I always say just light red, just because I bought the Venetian red to experiment with that color and see how it works compared to light red, and to kind of mimic a two color oil palette, sap green and the light red or red ochre. But light red works just as fine, I believe, with this mixture. I want to do a video on that, mimicking oil colors, oil paints, or at least the tonalist, the two color sketches in oils, and doing that with watercolor. So just putting in a horizon line of trees. You know, might help have a strong mass right up here. To kind of block the eye. As it dries, we'll have to come over that with a darker concentration. Bring this out of the bank. I do like grabbing a little bit of the raw sienna and feeding that to the top part of these far trees where they would catch that a little bit of that light. You could even take the Payne's Gray and feed that into the bottom to get a little bit of variety. Just swiping that, and I'll play around with it. This is that same dark right on this edge. Let's see, what else do we want to play around with? I could do, let's switch over to the rigger. Maybe a little too wet right now. Let's see, so we'll dry the rigger. Here's a thing to experiment with, and kind of just pull up what's already there in the paint itself on the paper, and that'll hopefully give us less of a diffusion like we had just gotten right there. So it's just working with the paint that's already on the paper and just kind of pushing it around. Think of it almost like, remember that sand art where you would take the bottles and you put the different color, different colored sand, and then along the edges you would push down the sticks to change that the color. So it's almost like that. You can get pretty wild with this, and with the way it dries, you really don't have to be too concerned. Let's see. Let's get some raw and burnt sienna. This is smattering. Now, I'm going to come back over here. I'd wanted to do a few trees. So this is kind of be like trees that I had done in the previous painting based off of my friend's pond. And we'll have a mid-ground of the trees that are, you know, fall, winter looking. And despite not really being there to capture the eye or anything, I think that the trees in this spot are important. It's pretty loose so far. I feel like a dry off is coming on soon, and we'll put in the foreground trees. However, kind of want to do the shadows, help everything kind of sit in place before we go there. And that was the purpose of hitting the burnt sienna and the raw sienna in the front as well. Okay, so let's do a dry off. If you have headphones on, just be careful. Actually, now's the time to get a good scrape going. So we did a little drying, but it's still damp. I want tree here. Another tree here. And we could tree right here, or leave it blank, but so let's leave it blank for now. We'll see how it looks. Okay, dry. Okay, during that dry off, a few important things to take place. Notice we have that white spot right here. That would happen with the initial wetting of the paper. If we, sorry, still wet right there. If we didn't wet the whole paper, we missed that spot. And that adds some interesting character to the paper painting. I'm not sure if the granulation is showing up, but you can see some granulation and the lifting of the paper towel that we had done. And here you see some back runs, that kind of cauliflowering that happened with the water coming back over into that cerulean blue, which gave a really cool effect and was not really intended, but I'll take it. You know, sometimes I think a lot of times you want to avoid that from happening, and that's why you add more water into that area while it's already wet. But there it looks really good. It kind of gives that cloudy overhang effect. Mixture of our burnt sienna and Payne's gray and ultramarine. That's what we used the last time for our darkest darks when we were coming forward with our trees. I really want a lot of texture in the trunk, and using that same dark for it to sit in place. We could bring this guy up here. And that'll give us some of that growth here. I'm extending this through for the foreground. Add some extra some texture with a little bit of scraping. I could also scrape down here for some interesting texture. I can grab extra dark for the backside. I'm going to try not to trace it all the way up, so I have a variety. Okay, now it's the tedious task of putting in branches. Now I'm not looking at a picture, and this is an imaginary scene, so I feel like in general rules, I mean, and you know, we would try to avoid rules, but we have to you know, come up with ideas and generalizations. Our branches are going to grow upward in general. We could have a branch that for variety comes up, hooks back around, and travels behind. And I don't know if you would necessarily catch that with your eye when viewing this painting, because we're going to have quite a few of these branches over it. But you could see that that's going to take place. You could have stuff that comes out and comes down, but it's going to be kind of the exception to the there's going to be less of those than the ones growing up, I believe. So here's our stronger structures, and then we'll dilute this and try to do thinner. I didn't really get much of a dilution there, but more watery branches near the end. And I'll also start adding different textural marks for the small twigs that'll come off. And the whole idea is to kind of give the illusion that all of this is taking place. I do have to come darker for a moment. believe I do need to establish one that would come across in front. And use the drying of the brush, the different parts of the brush, the heel of it. Like this is actually just pushing in the heel to get different textures as well. And I'm always a fan of growth around the bottom of trees. And we're not done with the branches yet. It's just sometimes you need to move away from it for a moment. Also want to make sure that not too many of these lines run parallel to each other, so it just has the more randomness. Let lines go in without connecting. Dry it off. The reason I did a dry off is sometimes you can kind of, if you come in especially with the hake on top of this, you can kind of throw things awry. I'm going to make my mixture again, but I'm going to try to get it quite dry, the hake. And I'm not going to use the whole hake. I'm going to use the side of it. And be gentle to see. Where we can get the marks. It's not so much that I'm really trying to make foliage as all those little twigs that'll come off. It's kind of the fuzziness of a tree in this state. And I don't mean state as in like a Louisiana, but like a tree at this point in time in autumn or winter. I think we'll go back to the rigger. In this painting, the main focus, the only tedious task is this right here, is putting in these branches and just overlaying them. And he was an actually really interesting tree painter. I think he's dead. I don't mean to say it so callously, but uh, if you want to look up some interesting, and I wish I had my Kindle here because I would literally just switch paste and show you pictures. Um, you all know the painter. I think it was constructivism, where it was all the lines, vertical, horizontal lines, red square, blue square, yellow square. Modrian, I think that's how it's pronounced. His style had developed initially from, if I remember correctly, from these trees that he would do in an abstract manner. And these trees are the coolest thing. So look up Modrian's trees, and you'll see how that abstraction, and he started breaking down these trees into those shapes. It was just, oh my God, just so beautiful, so cool. And not a lot of people check out his trees or know about it. Modrian is famous for those lines and colors, but that abstraction and the development of his style is just phenomenal. The reason I had thought of that was as we were putting this together. Trees will kind of almost take on a stained glass effect against the sky and create these bird holes in those shapes. And you want to look for that, and that makes it interesting viewing aspect. Anyway, Modrian, so check out his trees. Also, Cezanne landscapes. He had a very interesting painting where I believe his style with the sky and the trees would intermesh and overlap, so they would have kind of a atmospheric effect to them. So that's another interesting painter with trees. I know those two things, those two people aren't really this style of painting, but let's say Cezanne used the cerulean blue quite a bit, I believe. You would probably see this blue or this blue mixed with white in his oil paintings. I think he was also a watercolorist as well, so. But I think Cezanne had a lot of money. I'm not sure from what, and he may have taken more of a approach where he was painting and experimenting. There was also a painter, there's I think 2 or 3 videos of him on YouTube where he repaints a Turner painting. It was the retirement of the warship, and it's being drug in by the steamboat. And he also does a copy of, I think, a Constable painting and something else. I think he is deceased as well. And I think he was very famous for his forgeries. And he does one of a Cezanne painting, and he talks about Cezanne and his focus on shapes within the painting and the triangles. When I was in college, I think Cezanne had a big influence on me. We were given an assignment. I think I might have mentioned that I'm certified to teach art because of the quantity of art classes I've taken between drawing and whatnot, painting, photography. My degrees are in math and physics. But in one of the beginning classes, we were given postcards to pick from to paint or to do in pastel, an oil pastel. And it was The Card Players by Cezanne. So I think that had a lasting impression on me. And if my dad's watching this, if you're at this point, Dad, that's that painting in my old room that not the painting, the picture in my old room that is right above where the headboard would be, above the desk, where the desk is now, that smaller desk in there, with the guys playing cards, and I think there's like a pipe on the table, or one of them smoking a pipe, and there's a guy standing in the background. That's the one I'm referring to. It's still on the wall within there. Oil pastels are fun. That's my first real medium that had gotten me started in all this. And then one day I was in the store and I was like, screw it. And I bought 4 oil paints. And that's what got a lifelong time of learning started. Enough about me. Let's dry this off. Put this to the side. We'll dry it. We'll put a mat over it and sign it. So we'll put a mat on and sign it. And as you know at this point, you may or may not know, I like to experiment a lot, and I have a lot of ideas and videos I would like to film for y'all. Down below I have a whole bunch of links. I have links to my Instagram, links to, I made a Patreon account, to the Etsy account. I believe I'll post this one up there, and a whole bunch of different stuff. So give a like and a subscribe. Leave comments, questions below. If there's anything you'd like me to address or try to do differently, let me know. I hope you all enjoyed. Have a great day, and feel free to follow this tutorial and post your results. All right, have a good one.